Dr. Brown, how has the attendance here at the Kimball Museum compared with the attendance in other cities?
Well, we're very gratified because we feel the attendance is bound to beat Chicago. We're over 100,000 so far, and we have another whole week to go and another weekend. So we'll probably reach up to around 130,000 or 140,000, which will be better than Chicago and probably better than Los Angeles. And that's good for a relatively spare population center such as this.
What is the significant thing about this collection, Dr. Brown?
Well, I think that even though the pictures were all chosen in a kind of personal way by Dr. Armand Hammer and his brother and the curators at the Pushkin Museum in Moscow and the Hermitage in Leningrad, in a random kind of personal way, they do illustrate as a collection a very logical progression of one of the most important developments in the entire history of art, beginning, for example, with the earliest one in the show, the 1867 Monet of The Lady in the Garden. That's really a pre-impressionist picture which shows the sudden fascination and excitement with everyday scenes and the tremendous impact that really looking at light and shadow and what it does. And then, of course, you move on a little later to the birth of real impressionism in the Sisley, the view of the village on the Seine of 1872, and there you have really classic impressionism where what the artist tries to do is simply represent like a slice of the cone of vision without having any historical or mythological or legendary or religious motives at all involved. And this whole tradition, of course, kept on well down into the 20th century. One of the late examples of pure impressionism just after 1900, of course, is the Pizarro, the view of the Boulevard Montmartre, where he's still doing the same thing and getting even more excitement into it and getting very close to a kind of expressionist handling of paint, but it's still that complete sensation and nothing beyond sensation that the artist is trying to represent. Of course, while all this was developing and Impressionism was maturing, there were people who then thought to do other things, such as Cézanne, the marvelous portrait of the smoker, which he did over and over again. And what he was trying to get back to, after having learned everything that Impressionism gave him, he was trying to get back at the basic structure, the solidity, and the formal, solid relationships of things within space. And Cézanne, of course, was the great master of that and really the start of the whole 20th century school. But also other directions were taken. Van Gogh, for example, purely out of his own psyche and his own mind and emotional life, he was the beginning artist of Expressionism. He was trying to put feeling into it, which is exactly the opposite from what Monet and Sisley were trying to do. And then Gauguin came along and began to, you might say, embroider this whole tradition, and what he tried to do in the use of line and alteration of natural color was to get at a symbolic representation of things, not necessarily as they are or were, but everything from structure and composition and his personal feeling and attitude about it suggested by the formal things that he used. And then, of course, developing both the symbolism and expressionism, you come into the Fauve paintings, beautifully illustrated by the Derain, the port of Le Havre, where color is used in its pure form, a lot of bare canvas still showing. And then, of course, Matisse picked this up in his very rich color and dense kind of compositional richness that then became so important to his later career, of which we have many examples in the show. And a still life such as this one, it shows the beginnings of that, but not its full maturity. Then, of course, coming mainly out of Cézanne, you had the Cubist development by Picasso and Braque. But, of course, Picasso started in, one might almost say, a traditional way. The portrait of Soler, his tailor in Barcelona, although very blue and has its own mood set by his color restrictions and so forth, it still follows the same tenets as a Van Dyck or a Rubens or a Velázquez portrait. But by the time he gets down to 1909, he's beginning to analyze objects in space from a four-dimensional point of view. There's space crossways and in depth, and then space as you move around things. And the head of the young woman that he has of 1909 is the most perfect example of that analysis of space. So within a period of not even a half a century, you have a whole corner of the history of art turned by just the pictures that are represented in the show.
Dr. Brown, I'm sure you must be very gratified at the response that the people of this area have
Oh,
given.
indeed, we are, yes.
Yes, and we're very
Delighted.
gratified that you would take the time today to visit with us
Well, we're
here
so
in
proud
your-
of it. We like to talk about it, and we want as many people as possible to hear about it and come.
And they have through Sunday, actually, to come and
Next
see.
Sunday, September 16th, we're supposed to close the doors at 8 o'clock in the evening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brown.
Thank you.